Hello and welcome to the channel. If you've come across any of my music or any of my videos before, then you'll know I'm a big fan of modulation. So of course I'm going to be interested in a pedal that has two different sorts of modulation in one. So today we're going to be checking out the stereo electric Mistress from EHX. Now just before we get into the pedal, a little bit of a history lesson, because the original electric Mistress is quite an important pedal, because it was one of, if not the first pedal flanger. That original pedal was an analogue pedal which used a bucket brigade circuit in order to get its sort of swirling, whooshy, flanging tones. These were developed around 1975 and 1976, and they were then released in 76 and ran in the original production until 1981. Now that's the original pedal, but of course the pedal we have here today with us is the modern recreation of that. And as well as it being a modern recreation of that flanger, it also takes it further and adds some extra features. So this is the modern pedal, and it's not just an electric Mistress, but the stereo electric Mistress. And with that stereo badging, as you would expect, you have the option for stereo output. As well as this, you also add in a chorus circuit, which as far as I'm aware isn't based on any specific chorus, although with it being EHX, it is certainly in that small clone sort of realm. But we'll get onto that in just a little bit. So on the pedal itself, we're keeping it fairly simple. Of course, we have the stereo out and single input, as I mentioned a minute ago. We then have rate, flanger depth and chorus depth controls, as well as an on-off LED, which, as you can hopefully see, and if I crank up the rate, goes from a red to a green through an orange sort of colour. The settings you can see here are the settings I used in that intro, along with my Fender Vintera 2 60s Strat and a Marshall SV20H, which is a plexi style of amp. I've also got an MXR carbon copy just for a little bit of ambience in the effects loop of the amp. So I'm going to turn the pedal off just for a second and just clean it straight into the front end of the amp. The guitar sounds like this. So not the cleanest, but not really dirty either. And then with the same settings that you heard in the start of the video, the pedal sounds something like this. So let's take a look at each of these effects in isolation. Of course, the rate is uniform across this pedal, and the two effects do interact with one another, but let's just take them one by one so you get some idea of what they sound like on their own as well. So we'll start with the flanger, because obviously that's what the original electric Mistress is known for, and we'll start with a nice low rate, and to start off with we'll just leave the depth at 12 o'clock, and that sounds something like this. And then cranking the rate up to 12 o'clock, sounds something like this. And then finally cranking the rate up to about 3 o'clock, sounds something like this. And of course, if we turn the rate back to about 12 o'clock, we can also turn up the depth, which at 3 o'clock, a bit more aggressive, sounds like this. And then all the way up, I'm just going to bump the rate up a little bit as well, because it can get quite harsh, and it sounds something like this. So with the depth all the way up, it gets really quite odd. We'll switch that off now, and we'll switch over to, with the rate at 12 o'clock, once more the chorus, which will start off on about 12 o'clock, and that sounds something like this. If we turn the rate down to about 9 o'clock, it sounds something like this. And with the rate up at about 3 o'clock, it sounds something like this. And of course you can turn up the depth, so with the chorus depth all the way up, it sounds something like this. But where this pedal really shines, of course, is when you allow both of these effects to interact with one another. So we'll start off with everything up at 12 o'clock, and we'll go from there. So with everything at 12 o'clock, it sounds something like this. Now my favourite setting for this pedal, as you've already heard, is with the chorus up a bit more and the flanger at midday, and that sounds something like this. But of course you could back the chorus off, say, and have more of the flanger in there, which sounds like this. And of course you can have everything in between and blend it just to your liking. Now I won't go really into it much more because, as you can probably tell, there is so many different combinations that you're able to get with this pedal that we'd just be here all day. But I hope that's at least given you a good flavour. It's one of those pedals where it's maybe a bit weird and daunting to start with, but I think given the right application it can really work. And as we heard at the start, for that sort of alt-rock, shoegazy, for things like The Cure, Joy Division, that sort of very specific alternative rock sort of sound where they use a lot of chorus and flanger and that sort of thing, it's really spot on, especially for sort of leady parts. But I'd be really interested to know what you think, so drop me a comment and leave me your thoughts down below. And I think that's just about going to do us for today. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.